And then let me, do you already have the presentations up here?
I do not.
Okay.
But I can pull them up.
Now?
Yes. Up there, and then we can find it. Right down below. Yeah. How's everybody's week going so far?
Super.
Are you guys continuing to talk to your organizations?
Any progress? I know that, Brad, you hadn't been able to get in touch, right?
Yes, no, I got in touch with him. It's been a difficult time getting in touch with him. We tried like 3 times before we finally got it to work, but we got it.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Is it just like technical difficulties and timing, or?
Some of it was technical difficulties. Some of it was timing. He asked me to meet at like 4 o'clock in the morning my time, which I told him was not a good time for me to meet.
Yeah.
So we've been kind of just trying to work through some of those issues.
Yeah. That's fair. Okay, let me share my screen.
I know the deadline registration is 31st.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Hoping this week we can let you know about that.
Hopefully there it is, and that would be like a valuable thing.
Yeah. I wonder how much, like, you know, mention like that. I don't know any other.
Yeah. Because they did talk about groundwater.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I'm gonna begin.
Is there a little bit you pulled up the
Yeah, this
Um,
works. Okay, so I'm gonna like make your images small so I can see the screen. So if you have any questions, shout it out. So, I won't be able to see you guys. Okay, so this is probably something that you might have to do if you are presenting or you're running a training and things go wrong, like you don't your room gets changed or you don't have electricity. So being flexible is always good.
Just testing you.
Yeah, we're just testing. This is like one of the things that happen, even in the development form. Okay, so today we're going to talk about monitoring and evaluation, part 1, and the goal of this class is we're not going to go super deep into monitoring and evaluation per se, but we're going to start off with this concept of a theory of change, which I'll define more explicitly. But as a way of you to get a better foundation and grounding and understanding of what your project is, most of the time you will typically start planning your monitoring and evaluation as part of the project design, but these projects have already been designed for you, and you guys are more like consultants who have come in to work on more specific parts of the project. And so we're going to use this theory of change as like a tool for you guys to understand the project and where you fit in, and as a basis to start thinking about monitoring and evaluation, which I'll kind of get to more at the end. So second slide, class learning objectives. So these were from the syllabus. Hopefully by the end of this class, everyone will be able to interpret a theory of change, or as I refer to throughout the rest of the presentation, a TOC. You'll be able to make the connection between a theory of change and a monitoring and monitoring evaluation, and you'll be able to use this tool to create a theory of change for your own Trellis project and use it kind of as a collaboration, like jumping off point between you and your organization. So at the bottom, I just want to note, and I think most of you have probably seen this in your roles or reading through the initial proposal. from your organization, but we asked all the organizations in their proposal to make this activity of like planning and refining a monitoring and evaluation plan like part of the role regardless of what the project was. So all of you should be doing this with your organization. And we kind of thought of this class, so this is part 1, and there's going to be a monitoring and evaluation part 2 a little later on in like 3 or 4 weeks. And that's when we're going to really get into like how to design a neat plan, and I'll give you like a couple examples of the matrices that you can use to actually fill it out. And that's kind of going to be like the deliverable of this class at the end, since it's something that you guys have to do for your project already. And yeah, this is kind of more just like a concrete, tangible way of making that happen. Okay, so as you all know, most of you filled out a pre-class survey. So third slide, we have, this is just kind of the results of that survey. So we have like a 2.3 average that people rated their current knowledge of monitoring and evaluation, which is great because there's lots of room for improvement. It was kind of like in the middle. And so hopefully that, yeah, by the end of these whole 10 weeks, you'll be able to say, a little bit more. And then some of the comments that kind of came out was there is experience more in the quantitative like results aspect of monitoring and evaluation, but there is more interest in like really trying to assess impact. And people have maybe seen or heard of some tools before, but would like to know more about how to put that all together. And so this is the aim of both part 1 and part 2. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. What is a theory of change? So like I said, it's this tool that I'm presenting to you guys to think of as a way to better understand your project. So it's typically used in the planning stage of a project. It's used for planning. You can use it as a participation, or in an evaluation. You can take a theory of change that was designed in the design phase and use it in the evaluation stage to say, is this causal model accurate, or is it inaccurate in some way? So this kind of this little cartoon up in the corner I really like, and is often used when talking about theory of change. It's like there's like math on one side, math on the other, and then in the middle it's like a miracle occurs, and that's kind of a lot of what projects sometimes do. They're like, oh, we're gonna do all these things, and it's gonna like improve livelihoods, and they don't really talk about like how training like 10 people on post-harvest leads to improved livelihoods. Like, it happens. So theory of change is a tool that really is trying to make that like missing middle, or that gap, it tries to fill it in. Yeah, defines the path from doing to being. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, helps you also conceptualize where you might need to collect indicators or do some focus groups to make sure that those like links between activity and your end goal make sense. So yeah, so basics of what a theory of change is meant to do. Like I said, it's a causal model. It's meant to clearly demonstrate what you're doing and why you're doing it. Sorry, I have like all these notes. The way I like to think of it, it's basically kind of like a pitch. It should be able to convey what you're doing and why in a really simple and clear way, both to project partners and donors, and also to like the general public even. So it's meant to, yeah, be very easily understood, which is a great way, why I think it's such a nice tool in this sense, for you all who are kind of like jumping into a pre-designed project, if you can create, in collaboration with your organization, a theory of change, then it really makes sure that you're all on the same page about what the project is and is not. And if you, like in your first draft of the theory of change, that you potentially make, there's like glaring gaps, that's like points towards questions that you could pose to your organization, because maybe it's you and you aren't understanding what they're saying, or maybe it's them and they aren't being clear enough in how they're talking about this. Yeah, so it's really great, like I said, foundation and jumping off tool to form discussion and then get on the same page about what the project is trying to do. Yeah. So moving on. So this is kind of like a template of a theory of change. Oftentimes it's just a very pictorial, like flow chart type of thing that can be accompanied by like a narrative that explains the picture. And so, like I said, so there's all these interventions that you could do. And I'll go through a couple examples that lead to, in theory of change terminology, are called preconditions, that then lead to other things that eventually all lead to your long-term goal. So a nice thing about theory of change is that, so there's all these arrows. In all these arrows, there's all these assumptions that you have. And so you can also use this tool to like clarify the assumptions that you're making and make sure that you are aware, and these assumptions can also lead to defining indicators that can, because these are, like I said, these are theories, and so you can treat them as like, well, this is like my hypothesis, or like my theory, and these assumptions I'm making, I can test these assumptions, basically. So next slide, I have an example that I made for savings groups. So savings groups, for those that don't know, are groups of like 10 to 20 people who come together and basically form kind of like a credit union. They all put in money. They meet at like pretty regular intervals throughout a year. Could be once a week or once a month. They all put in like a designated amount of money into a collective pool that people in the group can then take out loans from. And the loans get repaid with interest. And at the end of the year, all of the money people saved plus their share of the interest gets shared back to them. So it's a way of both saving and getting access to credit. And so, as you can see from this like theory of change, the intervention is training a savings group, basically. We trained them on this methodology and how to administer loans and how to track the interest and how to like share out at the end of the year. And so this intervention then leads to these preconditions of people have improved financial management skills. They know that they're going to be having to like save a certain amount of money every week or every month. So they're thinking about planning this, and then they also know that at the end of the year they're going to get this big sum of money back, so they can start thinking about planning on what to do with that larger like sum of money at the end of the year. Members are able to save money because oftentimes in like really rural areas where people don't have bank accounts, like how do you safely save your money? It becomes hard to just do on your own. So they have like this tangible way of saving money, and then they also have access to credit from the group. So these are like the more like immediate preconditions that are created, and then those lead to other things. And you can see there's like tons of arrows, which is something that's nice, I think, about a theory of change, is that while it is like overall like a linear process, you can see a little bit more of the complexity of a project, because it's not just like one activity is going to lead to only like one outcome or one output. There's A lot of these arrows are like double-sided, such as like improved financial management might lead to like having more like regular income in the sense that you are not like spending all your money at once. It like smooths out your income just by being able to plan better. And then that regular income can mean that you invest money in income generating activities because you're better able to plan your income smoother, and then you can maybe invest that more regular income into creating even more income and things like that. Or you can access credit, and that can enable you to invest in your child's schooling, or you could pay for medical bills, and that in and of itself can also lead to this overall broad goal of sustainable livelihood. Any questions about this so far from the online group? Questions? I'm hearing silence, so I think no. I didn't in this example delineate the assumptions that I made because it would get too crazy. But I encourage people to do that maybe if they have like a really big piece of paper or more time. Okay, so something else I kind of wanted to bring into this idea of the theory of change is a very similar concept of what's called a results chain, which is this like chain from like inputs to impacts that you see on the following page. And so inputs and activities are what the project actually is planning to do. Inputs are the financial, human, and other like resources that you need to do the activities that you're planning to do. The activities are the actual like where the rubber hits the road of the project. They're the actions you take. So building a demonstration plot or conducting a training. Computers oftentimes is definitely an input a lot of times. Having a computer is a very valuable input to being able to, for example, put on this workshop. And this workshop would be the activity. The output is from output to impacts, that's the intended results of a project. And so you can think of these at the different levels. So outputs is like the immediate results, are the immediate output of what you've done. Products or services resulting from your activities. So, for example, I could say if I was monitoring this, the output of this activity is that overall, both in person and the people that watch this at home are trained or like know more about theory of change and how to use it for monitoring and evaluation. The outcomes of that are that it's what you actually do with that afterwards. So the outcome of that is maybe you know more, so now maybe you'll use this tool and like have a productive conversation with your organization about the project. And then the impact is like the longer term. This is thinking really big picture, longer term aim of the intervention. The impact maybe of you having a really productive conversation with your organization that the project is better understood by both parties, and it's refined and made like more successful like by that conversation. So adding in like the terminology from the previous slide with theory of change, the interventions that were in like the green like explosion stars are your inputs and activities. I kind of lumped all of the activities together in the intervention like shape, but I encourage you all to be more specific. You can make as many boxes or as many star shapes as you would like. It will only make it like better because you're being even more detailed. I just didn't have enough space on my slides to do that. So yeah, so the inputs and activities are what in the theory of change diagram a couple slides ago was an intervention. The preconditions are your outputs and outcomes. And so here the outputs and outcomes are like seen at different stages. And there could be more stages. There could be like short-term outcomes and medium-term outcomes and longer-term outcomes. And it's kind of hazy where the true like line between all of these are. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes sense for who you're talking to. But then impacts is what was in the purple like box or hexagon or whatever at the top. Your impacts is this long-term outcomes. It's the change, the long-term change that isn't really oftentimes seen within the lifespan of the project itself. It's something that happens on down the line. That it's what you hope to achieve, but it's not something that is typically realized within the span of the project as this is defined. But in my example of you guys using this workshop and the impacts being like more successful implementation of the project, it really depends on like what level you're talking about these. So at the overall project level, yeah, the impacts might not be seen until a year, 2 years, 10 years later. But if you like use these terms on very small scale components of the project, then it really depends like how you define success in implementing your project. Could still be like the impact of that, this very small activity as you define it. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so here's like another diagram that I found. I think this was made by World Bank. Kind of shows how both of these ideas relate to each other. So you could have like these different stages of the results chain mapped over like how you would define a theory of change in the like diagrammatic sense. So that's actually what I want to do with you all today. There is another PowerPoint in the Smart site that should be labeled like activity. And I'm going to stop share and reshare this with you guys. Okay, can you guys see this building a theory of change? I'm assuming. Okay, so this is going to be the activity. I went through everything very fast, so feel free to ask clarifying questions about anything. Here, and this is kind of like the overview of the activity. Like I said, you usually create a theory of change starting with a goal, and then moving backwards towards like the inputs essentially. But you guys are all working on projects that have already been designed, that already have like a framework. So for this activity, I have given you guys an example where there's a goal and there's objectives and there's activities. This is actually based on a real project that Silport Lab is funding in Burkina Faso on like post-harvest technologies for tomatoes. And yeah, the next slide, as you can see, is this I delineated out like inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And I have a bunch of boxes at the side, some of which have been filled out and some of which haven't. And I'm gonna throw it out there to you guys I'll move the boxes around, but you guys can tell me like where to put things and where to draw arrows between them, and what other things I should put in these other boxes. So I'll give you guys like a couple minutes to like read through the goal and objectives and activities and look over this second slide. And then at 12:45, I'll have everyone like, pitch in and fill it out. Any questions from here? I'll make you guys visible again. Any questions from our remote students? No? Okay, 12:45.
Sorry. Hello.
Yep.
I didn't hear what you said last time. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, or any other person. The network is kind of breaking, so I couldn't.
Oh. So, what parts did you not hear?
Yeah, this last part that you said.
This last part. Okay, so this.
5. So what are we gonna do?
So this is like an example of a real project which I'm trying to simulate is like the projects that you are all working on, where the project has been designed, and so you're trying to like take the information that you have and put it into this theory of change like diagram.
Okay.
Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And this PowerPoint is also on our Smart site if you guys want to download it yourselves and work on it kind of. I don't know if it's possible to work on it side by side. But yeah. Okay. I'm going to get some water. I'll be right back.
Sorry, these are fixed. What's my question? Yeah, I think these are fixed. Good question. Oh, yeah.
Okay, are people ready to start working on this? Yes?
Sure.
Mouse and minutes. Okay, I'll give you guys a few more minutes.
Good. Oh, cool, yeah. I agree. I feel like, yeah, it was like this was the very first, it was like the This is an It's like like if we suggest other things need to be included, we can write more things in the blank boxes.
Yeah, and you can make more blank boxes. I just made a random number of extra boxes.
Oh, that's products. Yeah.
Oh, I guess it's the big space.
Geometry.
Well, yeah.
Stands for post harvest?
Post harvest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or to like the acidic basic pH first.
No, yeah, post harvest. Abbreviations so they can fit these little boxes.
Yeah.
Okay. You ready? Are you guys all ready? Cool. Okay. Brad, it's like you're muted.
Sorry, I was just I was sharing with Tia is in the same room as I am.
Okay.
So we were just yes.
Well, why don't you guys go first and tell me should I add any more things to these blank boxes, or where should I put some of the boxes that I've already filled out?
So we haven't gone into adding any new boxes yet. I think we've been working on trying to figure out where the current 5 would go. And so we were currently discussing whether we thought training would be an input or an activity. I think we were trying to figure out where the inputs might come from.
Okay. Go ahead. What do you guys, or both here in Davis and in other parts, what do you guys think about where to put the training in terms of
Training 30 local extension agents.
Yeah. Activities?
Yeah, go there.
Yeah. So that's where I would put it. So I actually, when designing this, would say I haven't put in any input. Like the whole input column is probably these blank boxes that haven't been filled out yet. And so we can, after we've put the already filled out boxes in, we can brainstorm what else needs to go in there. Okay.
The build pH capacity, would that be outcomes or outputs?
So that is a good question. I think it's kind of however we want to define it. Okay. Because what do you think like this follows from? I'm going to put it in the middle for now.
Okay. So PTSD as a training?
Yeah.
What is PTSD?
So in the previous slide, it says, under activities, it says build a post-harvest training and services center. So that's like I said, it's the center where you could both get trained on various post-harvest methods and technologies, but it also provides services such as like solar dryers that you could rent out space in, or like a cold room that you could rent out space in, or other sorts of like tools to like say like jam making materials and stuff like that. So that's what a PTSD is. So yeah, we think PTSD is under activities also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these two things line up with the build capacity, right? Okay, so I just drew 2 arrows pointing toward that. What do people think it should fall under, outputs or outcomes?
Well, I was thinking based on what we have here, wouldn't maybe an increased understanding of the challenges and opportunities be the output, and then because of that increased understanding, the outcome would be building the capacity?
Yeah, that could be something for sure. So I'm just putting it down here. So you're saying with these training the extension agents and building the PTSD lead now to this increased understanding, or yeah?
That
I think
to conduct value chain assessment of tomatoes and activities. So all 3 of those activities would equal that output, which would then lead to that outcome.
Okay, so we're saying post-harvest capacity. So these 3 lead into the increased understandings of challenges and opportunities that lead to this building post-harvest. Okay.
You probably copy and paste that.
I think I can. I think if I have it there, then maybe we'll do it forever.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. You get it on the Zoom.
Oh.
Gotcha.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, and then this one, that's what we're saying. Are we like missing anything? How does building post-harvest capacity like lead to these things? Of decreased food insecurity, increased income, increased nutrition.
Reduce waste, increase saleable crops.
Creating the like physical infrastructure, and then also that like human capital, I guess, that network.
Sorry, say that again?
Like physical infrastructure, I guess, with the PTSD, and then also the and like the solar dryers, but then also the human capital aspect of like that network of teachers and people that are able to give each other advice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like human knowledge. Infrastructure. Here, okay. So we're saying that so where would reduce food waste, increase saleable crops, physical infrastructure, and human knowledge like fit here?
Outcomes for
Wouldn't
and increase saleable crops.
Okay, so Nick said reduce waste goes in outcomes and increase saleable crops goes in outcomes.
And then the other 2 may be inputs.
I could see that those 2 also going in outputs though. I don't know. It seems kind of like subjective. I don't know, maybe.
I guess the materials needed to build that physical infrastructure, I guess. And
Should we change this then to like? Should we change the physical infrastructure then to like the post-harvest technology and materials. Then, does that sound right?
Yeah.
Like what you're saying? It goes in input. So were you saying, Pete, that it seems kind of subjective, like where this falls?
Kind of. I could see it. So if I understand, outputs are the immediate results, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of activities. And the immediate result of building this facility is going to be reduced food waste, correct? Because they know how to process this. I don't know. It seems, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like outputs and outcomes could.
So there is like, so it often is like a fine line between a lot of these things. So I would say, and it depends also like on how granular you make these boxes as well. Like how detailed, like how many boxes you want to include and how many steps you want to create, and then it makes it possibly a little bit more clear. So for this activity, I'm not going to say there's any right or wrong answers, of course. And as you can see, like we're all debating and talking about this, and that's kind of what I hope that you guys will do with your organizations as well. Like you could create something and then say, does this make sense to you? Is there something missing? Or if you're trying to make this and there's like, because you have like the list of activities and you have like the eventual like impact that the project that you're working on is trying to have, and you can try and like do this mapping out, and if there's glaring gaps, it's a way of talking about them. But so when I was thinking, the way I thought about this activity is, so the training and the PTSD and the value chain assessment are all the activities. The value chain assessment is what I linked to the increasing understanding of challenges and opportunities. So that's like an immediate output, which is what we have. The building of the PTSD and the training of local extension agents is also leads to the building of post-harvest capacity. So that is what I thought of as more of an output than an outcome. And with both of these two things, then we can link it more to these reductions in food waste. So I would have put it like more, I would put this here. There could still be an arrow between these things, but maybe like this. And then these two, I would say human knowledge could be thought of as an input also. You need to have people that know post-harvest information in order to do those trainings. And
I was thinking probably human knowledge can go into the output, because the immediate effect, the immediate outcome of the activity will be the human knowledge. You want to improve the knowledge so that it will be able to, you can get outcome and on a long run, the impact. I was thinking another perspective probably.
So I'm gonna make this like project staff knowledge, and this is gonna be extension knowledge. Spelled that right. I feel like extensionist is never a word that, ignore. Sorry if I spelled that wrong. So yeah, extensionist knowledge could be an output, and you said then the capacity was the outcome. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that was what when you mean by extensionist, do you mean by, for example, we students or the organization, the people affiliated to the organization?
So for this project, so this is a real project, like I said. And they are planning to train 30 local extension agents who are currently like horticulture experts on post-harvest methods and technologies related to the post-harvest of horticulture generally, and specifically tomatoes, so that those extensionists can then train like local like smallholder farmers on how to actually utilize these technologies and practices for themselves.
Yeah, I think this will work.
Yeah, so that's another thing that I have here. Like training farmers on post-harvest. Farmers. So that's something that, so going back to this first slide with the goal. So the goal is to increase resilience in terms of income, food security, and nutritional status of smallholder tomato farmers. But you can see in the activities that they aren't working directly with farmers at all. They're working with extension agents, and they're like building this facility, and then they're conducting like a value chain assessment. But none of that is directly working with farmers. So that is something like in this building this theory of change, you have to like make more explicit and connect like how is training extension agents going to increase the resilience of smallholder farmers, and make that more explicit. That makes sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So I would say maybe like this building post-harvest capacity is, I think it is like one of the objectives that they laid out. Build a greater understanding, or yeah, build local post-harvest capacity is an objective. But it's like a very broad, high-level objective that, like we did have before, is kind of fed in by all of the activities. Yeah. Okay. So, not to belabor this much longer, because I feel like you guys all get the point. But yeah, so this could be. So this is like a precondition. If these, I also want to make the point, if these like inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts don't like make things more complicated for you, like figuring out what's an output versus an outcome, you can drop them and just create like a regular theory of change like I had in the previous examples. You only have to use this delineation if it helps you think about them. If it doesn't help you, then don't use it. Because yeah, it is sometimes kind of arbitrary and subjective. And it's fine that it's subjective as long as you and your organization are on the same subjective page. If that makes sense. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop actually with this activity, if that's okay. Are people fine? You guys, I will save this version and upload it and put it on the Smart site, and you guys can play around with it further if you feel like you want to, or just to have it to look at. And yeah, any questions? We're good. Okay. I will go back to my very last slide then of the previous Okay, slide. Okay, so we did the activity. Now it's connecting like this activity back to monitoring and evaluation. So first off, let's define what that is. So M&E, they're oftentimes thrown together, stands for monitoring and evaluation, and they're very similar, but there are some key distinctions. So monitoring is the more routine assessment of information on ongoing project activities, and it's really used to track progress in the project. I like to think about monitoring as asking the question, are we doing things right? Are we on track to meet the 30 farmers that we were planning to train? It's also really good to set like very specific timelines and very specific like numbers that you want to hit, because then you can judge better whether or not you're on track or not. So it's great to say like we want to build a PTSD, but like if it takes you 10 years, maybe something's wrong. So if you say like, oh, we want to build a PTSD by the summer of like 2018, then in the summer of 2017, you can see like, okay, are we on track to like meet that deadline? And monitoring things like that help you in assessing that sort of stuff. And it helps you to adaptively manage your project. So those are, I'll get into this more in detail next time, but those would be more like progress indicators. And they tend to be, although they aren't always, more quantitative, and they're like kind of counts of like, we said we were going to train 30 people by November, but it's like October, and we've only trained 15 people. What do we need to now do to like get back on track? Do we need to reassess that like target, push back the date? Was that too ambitious? Or maybe maybe we plan to only train 30, but we've actually trained 60. We're like way ahead of schedule. Maybe we should like push other things up further. So both on the positive and negative side, you can adaptively manage your project with monitoring information. So yeah, monitoring asks, are we doing things right? Evaluation, on the other hand, asks more, are we doing the right thing? So it oftentimes uses the monitoring data that you've collected to say, is this actually like the right activity to be doing? We have this long-term goal of improving resilience or increasing like the nutritional status of farmers. Is training extension agents like the right activity to be doing to achieve that long-term goal, or are there other things that could be more effective? You can also evaluate things on a much smaller scale. So for example, we sent you all that class survey that assessed your like knowledge on the various topics that we're going to be talking about. And we're also going to give you like a very similar thing at the end to see how you guys rate yourselves in terms of change. And like, I want you guys to all be very, don't feel bad. If you guys are still confused and we didn't do a good job, please let us know. Don't feel like you need to stroke our egos when you fill that out. But so if, for example, none of the numbers end up changing, then we can evaluate this class as maybe being something that we need to work on better. Like there's stuff that we need to improve on. So you can evaluate both at the like broad project level, and you can also evaluate things very specifically. Like an individual training can be evaluated as well as an entire project. So linking these things of monitoring and evaluation to theory of change, like I said at the beginning of class, I think of theory of change as a tool for you guys to like build this foundation. because theory of change can make explicit the various activities that you are going to be doing in your project, and then you can use that visual to think about progress indicators for those activities. So you can say, so the activity is to train 30 extension agents. You can make it even more specific, train 30 extension agents like by a certain date. And then you can say, okay, what's a good indicator of success for that activity? And it's, well, it's kind of more of a count, like number of people trained is the indicator of success. So, and 30 is the goal. So if you haven't trained 30 by the end of that date, then you can say progress-wise, you're off track and you need to do something to help that. So yeah, theory of change makes the activities more explicit, and it also delineates, if you choose to do it this way, these like outputs, outcomes, and impact. And that gets more into the realm of impact indicators. And that's really where those like lines between the boxes help you think about your, like I said, your assumptions and what indicators you can come up with to test those assumptions. So if we train 30 extension agents, an assumption is that their knowledge actually increases, right? So we had like that other box that was like, we trained extension agents and like we increased, we built capacity, right? Of local post-harvest capacity. Well, that's a big assumption. Just training them doesn't actually mean that capacity was built. And so we can come up with some indicators of impact to really assess whether or not like that connection is a valid connection, or if we needed to be doing something else to make sure that those links are stronger. Does that make sense for everyone? The online folks? Cool. Yeah, so that is basically all I had for you guys for today. What time is it? We still have like 15 minutes. If people have questions, we could talk about if people have like questions about their actual project and how they would do this, or general questions about things so far.
I have a question about the M&E.
Yeah.
With the organization I'm working with, Card Nepal, one of my objectives is to develop a monitoring and evaluation plan.
Yeah.
And I think they said I'm going to do that after I visit, probably.
Okay.
So what is that going to look like? A paper, like a report?
So I'll give you guys some more concrete like matrix like tools and like that you could use to come up with your plan in M&E Part 2 in a few weeks. But yeah, it mostly looks kind of like a logical framework, but it has a little bit more detail in terms of means of verification of your different, so monitoring and evaluation really is, in terms of planning out, is really deciding like what's the information you're going to be collecting, how is it going to be used, who's collecting it, how are we collecting it, and like who's responsible for each part of this. That's like what the planning of monitoring and evaluation is all about. Picking the information, picking how you're going to collect it, and picking who's in charge of collecting it, and then picking who's in charge of like doing something with that information. And so you really want when you're designing your M&E plan, you really want to think about the usefulness of the information that you're collecting, because you could measure a million different things, but if it's not going to be like immediately useful to your project, then it doesn't matter that you can measure it. You really should be asking, should I measure this or should I collect this information? How is it going to be used? Either in like tracking my progress or evaluating like the success of a certain activity or intervention. And you also want to make sure that like your organization is able, because they're really going to be the ones that are collecting a lot of this information. So they might already have some things in place that they're already doing. So you should definitely ask them, like, do you already do like routine monitoring? What are the, like, what does that look like? What is the information that you're collecting? You could like build that into the plan, like so they already have the capability to do this. There's already someone in charge of doing it, and they already know how to use it. You don't want to like build into your plan something that no one will actually end up doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I put a couple monitoring and evaluation like manuals up on the Smart site also that you should feel free to peruse. They have like a bunch of figures and matrices and outlines. There's a million different things out there, so I would just encourage you all to explore the internet as much as you can. There's manuals like on specific topics, so you could find like one that's on your actual topic, potentially, because these manuals are made by like everyone. World Bank, USAID, DFID, like big NGOs even have their own systems, and so there's something out there for everyone. And there's no like super right or wrong way of doing it. Again, it's as long as it makes sense both to you and your organization, and it shouldn't be thought of as like something that's set in stone either. Your monitoring evaluation plan should always be flexible, because maybe when you start out, you think that a certain indicator is going to be super useful, but then when you actually get into thinking about it and trying to collect it, you find out that it's too difficult, or we've collected all this information, but we actually aren't using it in any way. And so then you can drop it. So it should be flexible. I will also say, so we have the organizations fill out a final report, very short, and there's not like that many indicators on there, but I will share that with you guys next time, so you're aware of what we, as the funder, are going to be asking of them, and you can build that into their plan also. Yeah. Any more questions? Nope. Okay. Well then, I will let you guys go a little early. Yeah. Cool. Feel free to email either my personal email or the Trellis email with any questions. This is my like nerdy area that I really like, so I'm happy to help you get as much as I can. Cool.
Nice. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.